In this video, I will be performing a suite in A minor, or more accurately, 4 movements in A minor I have arranged into a suite by François Dufaut. The movements are Prélude, Allemande, Courante, and Sarabande. Like all of Dufaut's works, these pieces were composed for the lute, and while music performed on an instrument not intended by the composer necessarily involves some form of transcription, a lot of lute music can be performed on the harpsichord with minimal and oftentimes no changes to the musical text. And I will discuss my approach for this suite shortly. Dufaut was born around 1604, moved to Paris around 1629, and must have quickly established himself as one of the leading lutenists there. Indeed, a collection of lute music published in 1631 by Pierre Ballard includes pieces by Dufaut along with composers associated with the court, which is a testament to Dufaut's reputation. Around 1650, Dufaut traveled to England. By 1653, he was at the court in Innsbruck. He returned to Paris around 1655 and left again for England around 1662. It is likely that he died in England sometime before 1672. He seems to have been a celebrated lutenist throughout his life, and judging by the significant number of his pieces that are preserved in Austrian and German manuscripts, his music must have been especially appreciated in those two countries. The movements I have chosen to perform originate from different manuscripts, and while assembling dance movements into a suite would have been standard practice at the time, this particular arrangement reflects my own choices based both on musical considerations as well as what was included in the edition I am using, namely, an edition containing transcriptions of the original tablature notation by André Souris, published in the series Corpus des lutistes français by the Édition du Centre National de la Recherche Scientifique in Paris in 1965. As I've already mentioned, most music written for the lute can be performed on the harpsichord with minimal and oftentimes no changes. But since different instruments have very different characteristics and expressive possibilities, it makes sense that when one is transcribing music for another instrument, one may want to take advantage of the unique possibilities that new instrument has to offer. However, what I tend to do when playing lute music on the harpsichord is not to make any changes to the musical text, with the exception of those rare instances where I have to move a note to a different octave in order to be able to play it. Obviously, this is simply my personal approach, but let me explain the reasoning behind it. When playing lute music on the harpsichord, one obvious area where one can make changes is in terms of enriching the harmony. And by this, I mean playing fuller chords than what is notated. The reason it is very tempting and in many respects also musically satisfying to do this is not just that one has 2 hands available for playing notes, but also because this way we can produce a fuller resonance on the harpsichord so that the instrument doesn't end up sounding a little bit empty. The trouble with this approach, however, is that it risks obscuring an essential aspect of harmonic writing in lute music, which is that harmonies are oftentimes deliberately implied rather than stated, something that can open up a whole world of harmonic and expressive possibilities, because an incomplete sonority can allude to multiple harmonic meanings. The most obvious example is when we have a triad without its third, which means that we don't know whether it is major or minor. And what I mean by this is that if we simply take, let's say, a triad beginning on C, if I play the note C and the fifth above, if I'm leaving out the third, we don't know whether it's going to be a C major triad or a C minor triad. So simply playing this kind of leaves open the possibility as to what this triad might be, and of course where it might lead to. Now let's look at an example from the Sarabande of Dufaut's suite. And what I specifically have in mind is the beginning of the second section. And of course, keep in mind that the piece itself is in A minor, but by the end of the first section, we have actually modulated to the dominant of E major. So the piece starts here. And then by the end, we have ended up to E major. And we kind of continue from there, although there's already a surprise because we start with an G natural. So now let me play this part, and you will notice specifically that there are going to be two open harmonies. One which is simply the note A, and then by the end of this part of the second section, we are going to again end up in an open C, in other words, just the note C. This one, notice I'm just playing A's. Again, I'm just playing C's here. Now, the one that I really want to look at is the very first one, the first of those two open harmonies, where we just have the A. And here's what's happening. So Dufaut leaves the possibility open here of what we're going to have. Is it going to be minor or major? We don't know. The listener is basically in suspense here because we really don't know which of the two Dufaut really wants. And yes, the continuation is an A major triad before it goes on this wonderful harmonic twist. But to me, the twist has already started with this open harmony because it could also be minor. Then, right? But we don't know which one of the two it is. So already there, we have this possibility of two different avenues. And the thing is, it's not that Dufaut doesn't write a full A major or A minor triad because he can't. I mean, clearly he can because we get the A major here. So he can write a full triad. It's not that the lute doesn't allow him to do so, but he chooses to do so. And to me, this is something very crucial. especially in a place like this, where having A major or A minor is not 100% obvious. So to me, if I were to fill out the triad and decide on whether to make it major or minor, would kind of destroy this ambiguity. Now, the second one, I think if one wanted to fill out the second, the C, that is doable, and I actually do that in my performance, because I think there the meaning is a lot clearer that it's going to be a C major triad. Let me play again this part. See, we're already here, we have a C major in inversion. And then we also continue. So in that part, when it comes to this C, I think the meaning is fairly clear. Even if we don't get the complete triad, I think we can fill out the information and it's pretty certain that it's C major. So there, I think it makes a little more sense to fill out the harmony and make the harpsichord resonate a little bit more. But again, what I would say is that one needs to be very careful and do this type of thing very, very sparingly. If something is 100% certain, then I can understand doing it. But if there's an ambiguity, I think it's important to leave the ambiguity there, because it's really part of the charm and the beauty of this music. As always, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy the performance.